People who worked for sketchy employers or businesses. What was your duck this time out moment? Was homeless and desperate to get back on my feet. Applied at sandwich shop in a mall. Interviewer looked at application. Looked at me. Said, "You go home and change. Come back. We'll put you behind counter. See how you do." Ecstatic me. Am I hired? No. We just try you out for little. See how you do. Left and did not return. In mall a few days later. He came over to yell at me about not showing up for work. Dude. Duck you. You didn't hire me. You just wanted free labor for a day. I'm not an idiot. Walked away. We went 3 pay cycles, 6 weeks, being told our checks were coming. But a bank error had wiped the payroll account and they were working on the loan to cover pay while they got the problem fixed. Everyone was then paid our full back pay, $30,000 plus in some cases, in cash. I took it and handed in my 2 weeks notice. The boss then gave me my expected pay for those 2 weeks in cash and told me not to come back. Watched my boss grab one of my co-workers by the throat and push him up against a wall because he was accused of stealing something. Turned out he didn't steal anything. Working at a nightclub. GM wanted me to fill Grey Goose bottles with Mr. Boston vodka to sell to people after they'd been drinking. He dropped and shattered a bottle of Patron. Then he wanted to use a strainer to put the glass shattered tequila into an open bottle at the bar. I got a below minimum wage check for 2 weeks. I was working my ass off. I said go duck yourself after confronting him about the check. Never came back and they were out of business like 2 months later. My boss asked me to help him commit insurance fraud. I was working for a large Ford dealer in MA and the parts department was prone to flooding. This day was a flood day. My boss walked around gathering up all of the expensive items that we'd been stuck with over the years and threw them into a shopping cart. He instructed me to push the cart outside and spray everything down with a hose to mimic flood damage. I refused. When I wised up and did some research into a state law that my boss claimed required clients to give us certain personal information. No such law exists. He was literally lying to clients' faces and having all of his employees do the same. Oh. And he was scamming the elderly with seemingly no remorse. He's currently being sued by elder law attorneys in 3 separate cases. My boss asked numerous times to come in on a non-scheduled day and place the hours during the next pay period. Those hours got denied every time. Essentially it was free work. Asked for me to get information on the competition and report to higher ups. Boss would forget to inform me of a meeting and tell the higher ups that I was lazy and didn't want to attend. The final straw. I had multiple out-of-state interviews for grad school. Time off did not get denied but the boss said we expect you to be at work on the days off I requested. The request was placed 2 months prior. My boss took away my breaks. Then drink called me one night for having a cup of tea at the end of a long shift. He screamed down the phone at me for 10 minutes. I walked out mid-shift and never came back. During my first shift, the manager made me drive a car thing even though I told him that I never drove anything before and then got mad at me when I crashed it. I ended up quitting after 3 weeks because one of my co-workers kept harassing me about wanting to have a threesome with me and my partner and my manager refused to do anything about it because he's a good kid and wouldn't do that. Edit. Spelling. Was told to pour the water and sediments from core drilling concrete floors in a hospital into the toilets and flush. That way when they clogged the next day we could be hired to replace them. Worst plumbing company ever. I worked at a burger place in college. It was casual dining. So instead of regular tipping, we had a tip jar by the cash registers. Now, the jar was clearly labeled tips in huge capital letters. At the end of the night, the cashier would count out all the tip money and place it in an envelope that went directly to the owner. The owner would take all the tips and keep them for himself. He was able to get away with this because he was already paying us minimum wage so tips weren't legally required. Also, his restaurant was walking distance from the college campus. if any employees got fed up with this system, which many did, and quit, he had a constant supply of broke college kids looking for part-time work to replace the quitters. After a few months of working there, I started recognizing repeat customers. I felt really bad because many of them would make an extra effort to tip because they thought the money was going to us, the workers. There was this kindly retired lawyer who stopped by every week. He would tip me extremely generously. I couldn't handle the guilt anymore. So I politely let him know that the money wasn't actually going to me or any of my co-workers. And that I felt bad that he was tipping us under the impression that it was. The retired lawyer got extremely angry. Because I guess there were some pretty serious legal ramifications to what the owner was doing. Because the tip jar had tips written on it. The owner was deceiving the customers. The lawyer spoke with the owner directly and called him out on his bullshit. As a solution, the owner replaced the sticker that said tips on the tip jar with a picture of the restaurant logo. He was still able to keep his tip money, but apparently without the legal risk. Because technically he was not collecting it under false pretenses anymore since the jar no longer expressly said tips. I quit the next day. I worked at Beachside Bar for a little bit last summer and the dude who ran the place was sketchy as duck. He told me to do all kinds of shady things that would get any business shut down in a heartbeat. He said if someone came to the bar and slid a $20 towards me to not check their ID and serve them regardless. He said if I saw a beach cop come by to hide any bottles on the counter down below the well by the drainage grates. He dropped a burger on the floor while grilling it. Picked it up. Put the SHHHH finger over his mouth and kept grilling it. He would sometimes take deliveries through the back door and tell me I wasn't allowed to be in the back room when he was taking the delivery. Always hid the boxes away before telling me I could go back in. The guy was sketchy as duck and I never got answers for his shadiness. The final straw for me was when he backed his car into another car parked in his lot and told me to write a note apologizing for hitting the car and a number to contact for reparations. He told me to write down my name and number and that he would pay me back for any money I had to give to the victim. I worked there for about 15 minutes after that, then left and never came back. I worked customer support for a mobile game company. I was honest with a disheartened customer who had complained that recent changes had made the game pay to win. It had, in truth, been a glitch with an update. I told them as much, assuring them the team would be fixing it in the next update. But then the game's profits skyrocketed. The team kept the glitch and put out a statement describing the change as an intentional one designed to improve the play experience. But there was my name plastered all over the game forums, claiming the opposite. I technically worked for a separate company that provided support for several studios. But the studio behind this game was our biggest customer. They approached my bosses, furious I jeopardized their cash cow, and demanded I be fired. I promptly became familiar with the underside of the bus, as I was gone within the week. When I was asked to roll over hours to other part-time employees to other pay periods to avoid fines, despite being understaffed and I myself being part-time as well. Never work in radio, kids. What the hell? It's what happens when you try to run a company on mostly part-time labor except sales and the 3 DJs for 6 stations. 29 hours per week max. I wish I would have taken that place down for this because it's super illegal. Well, I worked at a tattoo shop. The guy and business were legit. And my boss was a nice guy at first. He had security cameras up, which was no big deal to me cause it's not like I was stealing shit. Well, around Halloween, the owner was friends with this bartender chick and she wanted to bartend topless, but have a jersey painted on her to look like she had a top on. I had no problem with that. What I did have a problem with was him calling in his buddies the next day to watch his security footage of him painting this girl while she was naked. Another time I was working, next day I quit. He called his buddies in because he had security camera footage of an 18-year-old girl giving him a BJ for a tattoo. He was in his 50s. I was done after that. And the place closed down 6 months later. Worked with the mentally disabled and the manager was stealing food and money from them. I turned her into the office. She just got yelled at. Asked to transfer. Because I couldn't be an assistant to someone who went against my morals. Turned her into the state as well. Nothing happened. Went to a new house under a different director, and after a year of being at that house the manager told me I can't transfer to the day program to better fit my needs with ours. The AD told me I didn't need her permission. So I put in my 2 weeks at that house, and when she found out I was going to their day program she wrote me up for things I didn't do, so I would have to stay at the house she managed. I left that day and never went back. I couldn't work with a company that allowed stealing from clients and was petty. I worked in a comic book store when I was a kid. The owner was a fantastic guy. The store was in a strip mall and the guys at the Chinese takeout place at the end owned all the stores. This was before everyone used credit cards all the time, so the Chinese landlords would come around and collect the rent in cash. One of the partners at the takeout came in one day and told us that we couldn't pay in cash anymore. It had to be a mail check. One of the other Chinese owners had been telling his partners that some of the stores were behind on the rent, but he was collecting the cash and then gambling it away. I worked with a subcontractor remodeling bathrooms for major stores up and down the East Coast. They were considered the best team, so got a lot of the jobs. My wife was friends with the crew leader's daughter, so he brought me along for one summer. It turns out they were so good because they would take a lot of drugas that allowed them to never sleep. They would get a week's job done in a couple days, which made for really good money, so I stuck around. I had to bow out when they started shooting up heroin in the hotel room. They would then bring the needles to the hotel management, claiming they were left in our room in an attempt to get a refund for the room to save even more money for themselves. First job out of uni was as an events manager. Planning a new event in North Wales. Worked for 10-12 weeks on the planning and development. Until I got to the point where I needed to start paying for marketing materials, booking contracts, deposits, etc. Then found out the guy behind the company was trying to get £500,000 government funding to put the event on. Funding that was on the basis of like spending, match funding. Put my finance requests into the boss, who said we don't have any money to spend until we get the funding in. I pointed out the funding was on a matched basis. He said, don't worry, we can make it look like we spent our £500,000 and get the funding for nothing. Nope, out of there. Please create multiple fake accounts to feign popularity of our website. Please engage in a 1-1 message with every new sign up. Sign-ups weren't an issue. There were 1000s. It was the interaction and engagement that the platform struggles with. Having me act out a script and be interacting with myself so you seem busier than you are? No thanks. When my boss at the supermarket deli asked me to crawl into the large compactor dumpster to pull out expired meat, scrape the expiration dates off of the packages, and sell them. I was 17 working at a Tex-Mex place, and the boss asked me to leave work to do odd jobs at his house, across the street, a couple times. First time was just to water his pepper plants. Second time was to stand on his shoulders and hang his recently deceased aunt's many vintage hats on the living room wall. Took all afternoon with him being a sketchy creep, and he didn't even give me a hat. I didn't nope out at this point. Or even after I saw his huge bag of Coke on the kitchen counter. Later he opened an ice cream shop on the same block and had me work the counter a couple times by myself with absolutely no training. I had to tell every customer that they couldn't have any of the fancy milkshakes or blizzards or whatever he put on the menu BC I didn't know how to make them. Gave away free ice cream scoops. Still didn't leave. Worked that job several months until a hurricane finally destroyed all the properties. First our paychecks bounced, we got paid cash the next day. Then a week later the electric company turned off the power for not paying the bill. I quit the next morning. They paid £2.40 an hour after selling the hob as an apprenticeship. I was only given a 12-week contract with them, and it took a minimum of 33 weeks before you got paid minimum wage for passing the apprenticeship. I didn't mind as it was a summer job where I lived on site and they provided 3 cooked meals a day. The kicker was when I injured my foot while doing a training activity. I was stuck midway up a climbing tower for 30 minutes. As the weeks went in, my foot got worse and I asked to be taken off work activities that worsened it. They made me sign a sheet saying that I had a previous foot injury before I started working there. I was also accused of bullying my colleague when I asked her if she wanted a cup of tea. While the job itself was fun, I decided to never work there again. Edit. I should also add that they would only pay us a max of 42 hours a week. Even though most weeks it would be more like 60 hours. Worked at a small bakery. They were paying me under the table but also removing taxes from my paycheck and lying about it. I noped out of there when I found out they were also paying several employees below minimum wage under the table and were getting away with it because they couldn't get proper jobs, because of criminal records, or being mentally handicapped or whatever else. When I took the job, it was $4.14 an hour. Then it became $10 an hour a week later. Then my hours got capped at 20 a week. But I was still expected to come as much as needed. That's when I quit. Took them 3 months to finally pay me $400 for 100 hours of work. Restaurants can be sketchy as duck. Asked to recruit for the company at a college campus. After an hour there, I just felt like I was tricking kids into working for the same shitty company I was working for. So I quit right there on the spot. Faked financials to earn bonuses. Talking hundreds of thousands. Also, I didn't get any incentive to do it besides not getting fired. Just happened to me 2 weeks ago. My boss was never around and everyone else quit. He pretended to be his wife and told me he was in the hospital and to come get the keys so I could work alone. I stood in the driveway for 2 hours while she said I'll let you know where they are. His actual wife called me later. Said she never texted me. Boss was out smoking crack. Duck this, I'm outta here. I went to work for Vector Marketing, which is the people who sell Cutco knives to people in their own home. I figured whatever, I'll give it a shot. I got all the way through training and the guy was like, okay, now it's time to purchase your own set of knives. I had no idea I was supposed to buy my own and that it was a MLM scam, so I said I had to go to the bathroom and left. Worked a summer for a furniture place that was clearly going under due to mismanagement. Was informed that we might not get paid going forward, as the company was falling on hard times as it closed, but we were still expected to work to help out the company in its time of need. I have them my 2-week notice right then and there and they berated me for it. I once had an interview for a job selling insurance to old people. If I didn't sell enough each day, I would have to pay them. The worst part is that they slapped me with a "you don't have enough experience to work here" at the end of the interview. Worked on a boat that hauled up anchors from another boat and moved them to help move the vessel to lay cable in a river. With blisters and lines snapping out of my hands constantly due to incorrectly placed line hauling mechanics. I still worked 4 weeks of 15-hour days every day and it paid well. Anchors would sometime get fouled in its own cable. The last day, I saw the captain of the anchored vessel rappel down a line on the bow next to the fouled anchor and then was given a sledgehammer. From about 30 feet away my boat was hanging around and watching this guy bash a 2,000-pound anchor in order to uncoil itself from the wire. My mouth is completely jaw-dropped open. He managed to bash it loose, uncoil itself violently and come out unscathed. Then proceeded to climb up a line and continue for 3 more hours of work. Port captain was on my boat to understand why guys quit. My mouth was dry from it being open for so long. I figure the same for everyone else and that's why not much else was that day. We docked the boat and I told everyone on my boat I was leaving. They only realized I wasn't kidding when I packed my box. Thank you, Dad, for picking up your adult son hours away from home. I already knew they were engaging in wage theft of the hourly workers and that they were doing the absolute minimum and or looking the other way when it came to immigration verification. After going through their third HR person in 2.5 years, they approached me to see if I would be willing to help out in processing and signing off on immigration and HR forms. Nope. I polished up the resume and got a different job a couple months later. No way did I want my signature on sheet when I saw other feds came through.